up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of The Growth Blueprint. Super excited to have you guys here. In this episode, we're going to be talking about fasting. And we're going to talk about both intermittent fasting and longer term fasting because they are different and do different things, and I think both should be talked about, but they are different. So that's where we'll start right there. Is that there's generally like two types of fasting. And so there's intermittent fasting, which is the one you're probably most familiar with as a dieting strategy. And then the other one is like longer term fasting. And this is for periods of 24 or more hours consecutively. And now, typically when people fast, you have a goal in mind, right? And so there's different use cases for the different kinds of fasting. And so oftentimes intermittent fasting is used as a weight loss tool, right? And so it's something that someone will do to try and lose weight, to lose body fat, to reduce the amount of body fat that they're carrying around. Oftentimes when someone decides to do a longer term fast, at least in my experience talking to people that have done those things, oftentimes it's not for weight loss benefits, obviously, because like you can't just starve yourself and expect to successfully lose weight and keep it off, right? We all kind of know that. But oftentimes people that are fasting for longer periods of time are doing it for some of the health benefits that it can confer. Now, without getting too out into the weeds, because we are going to talk about this a little bit more, the health benefits of long-term fasting are different than the health benefits of intermittent fasting. Again, intermittent fasting is more a strategy that is used to try and reduce the amount of calories overall that someone is consuming in a day. And so oftentimes people will set themselves up with like an 18-hour fast. And so that's where you don't eat for 18 hours, and then you have a feeding window of 6 hours where you're allowed to consume food. And these windows vary from individual. There's no right way to do this. There's no like doing one thing, fasting for longer periods of time, having a smaller eating window, fasting for shorter periods of time, having a longer eating window. None of that matters. It's just what kind of works for you and what helps you actually reduce your overall calorie intake, because that is primarily the purpose of intermittent fasting, is to reduce calorie intake so that we get a calorie deficit. And by eating in a calorie deficit, we're losing weight. Now, that doesn't work for some people, and that's okay, right? That's not the point. And the idea is not to try and conform your lifestyle to fit a specific diet. It's to build a diet that conforms to your lifestyle that accomplishes the same outcomes, okay? Now, some people might have had great progress on intermittent fasting and seen a lot of weight loss, and it just works for them. It doesn't work for me. I love breakfast, right? I like eating throughout my day. I don't like having a small window where I consume food and then a long window where I don't. It doesn't work for me. I wouldn't do it. I've never done it, to be honest. I've never intermittently fasted. Not on purpose. Maybe back in like high school when I was wrestling, you could have called that intermittent fasting at periods of time. But, again, in that instance, I was using it as a weight reduction technique. But anyway, talking a little bit about the benefits of each kind, right? We just talked about how intermittent fasting is oftentimes used as a tool for weight management. Now, beyond that, and I know that this is going to disappoint some people out there, but beyond that, intermittent fasting does not confer any kind of additional benefit. Now, there's not something special about not eating for a certain period of time and then having a small eating window that does anything beneficially for our health outside of losing weight. And so you may be running through your head, well, this study said that intermittent fasting, you saw these improvements in these blood markers. And yeah, like that you did, but it wasn't a consequence of intermittent fasting. It was a consequence of the fact that the people lost weight, okay? If someone was intermittent fasting and they weren't eating in a calorie deficit and they weren't losing weight, you would not see improvements in health markers because they were intermittent fasting. Okay, the benefits of intermittent fasting are conferred and delivered because oftentimes you eat in a calorie deficit, which causes you to lose weight, and the weight loss itself is what leads to the health outcomes that people talk about with intermittent fasting, okay? Now, some people will say, well, it improves insulin sensitivity. Sure, losing weight also improves insulin sensitivity. It's not special. It's not a special thing to intermittently fast, okay? It can be a great weight loss tool, but not for everybody. If you've tried it and it didn't work for you, no need to go do it. If you haven't tried it and you don't think you want to have a small eating window, don't try it. Now, when it comes to longer term fasting, some of the benefits of longer term fasting are very different than the benefits of intermittent fasting because you're going for a much longer period of time without consuming food, any calories, right? And what happens when we go for a long enough period of time, and again, this varies by individual, but our body activates some different processes and it does some stuff that it doesn't normally do under fed conditions. And so some of these things, I'm gonna pull it up so I don't butcher exactly what it's called. So our body has a gas tank called glycogen. Now, glycogen is a storage form of carbohydrates that is stored primarily in our muscles. The majority of our glycogen is in our muscles, and it's there so that our muscles can have fuel and they're ready to do stuff, even if we haven't eaten for a little while, right? It wouldn't do us very good evolutionarily if we could only be active if we had food in our system, right? Because we might have gone periods of time without having a whole lot of food. And so we needed a gas tank. And so one of those gas tanks was called glycogen. The other one is called body fat, okay? But glycogen is the one we're thinking about right now because it's used quicker. And so it takes about 72 hours for your body to completely sap its glycogen stores, for the most part. Your liver's gonna keep making some and trying to fill your muscles up, but like for you to be running on empty, for those glycogen stores to be running on empty, it takes about 72 hours. And when that happens, when you go over that 72 hours, your body actually does some interesting things. And it starts to go through a process called autophagy. Now, this autophagy is, I'm gonna be honest and tell you that I don't exactly know where at it's occurring or the mechanisms behind the occurrences of it. But there is a whole body sort of autophagy process, meaning cell death or cell eating. Cell eating is a better term. That's the more accurate term. But as for your body takes cells that are like not doing great, right? Maybe they're old, they're a little bit damaged, and somehow, right, our body starts to consume those to come up with energy so that we can continue to survive. Now, this can be beneficial because you're clearing out some old cells, you're creating some room for some new ones. It also has long-term fasting has also shown that there are benefits in, let me go find it, stem cell regeneration, which I think is really fascinating. And it's especially good for our immune system, right? So our immune system is one of the areas that the autophagy happens pretty heavily in. And so our body kind of cleans out immune cells that it doesn't need so that the system's not all gummed up. And it does this partly because we're starving, right? We're not eating anything for long periods of time. And so we need energy, but also because it's kind of taking out the weak links of stuff in different places of our body, which can be beneficial for long term. Again, this is more theory than anything else. I have not read any studies that have studied the effects of like implementing long-term fasting twice a year over the course of 50 years, right? I've not read a study that looks at that, right? To see, okay, if you do fast for long periods of time regularly, whatever that even looks like, does this do anything for our health long-term? I've not read a paper that goes over that. And so more of it is hypothetical, right? We take these people, they fast for a long period of time, we look at what's happening, and some of these things could be beneficial in the future. It has not been proven that it is, but they could be because the adaptations that we see occur could be positive adaptations, but we just don't have conclusive data to say whether or not it is. So we see some stem cell regeneration, which is really cool, especially in the gut and in immune cells, right? So obviously, right, if we have more stem cells are like the baby cells that turn into new cells. And if we have more of those, then we're going to be replenishing the older ones, and we're going to maybe be more robust, right? There is an argument for why doing long-term fast might be beneficial. There's also some research has found that there could be some cognitive benefits to long-term fasting. And again, this is kind of based around this idea of autophagy, of kind of cleaning out the system, so to say. But yeah, so that's kind of what to think about when you're thinking about long-term fasting. Think about it as kind of like a reset, right? And again, like you can't do like a 3-day fast and then go feed yourself garbage and think you're going to feel good. It's not going to work. But yeah, so that's kind of the benefits of each and what each is kind of used for. So I kind of want to go back and talk about intermittent fasting as it pertains to weight loss, and really drive a point home, because intermittent fasting is a diet, right? It falls under the thing of diets, okay? And I just want to make this very clear that there have been many, many, many research studies that have looked at different kinds of diets and how well those diets do for weight loss compared to one another. So looking at, is keto better than intermittent fasting? Is intermittent fasting better than Whole30? Is Whole30 better than paleo? Is paleo better than keto, right? Looking at comparing all these things. And what they found is that no diet shines in terms of weight loss. They're all pretty much the same. They're all equally bad. And what they found instead, and I've brought this up on other podcast episodes and on social media, is that rather than there be a diet that works the best, what they have found is that what you're able to stick with for a long period of time is what works the best, okay? And so again, like I started this episode out talking about how intermittent fasting has no benefits outside of the benefits that come from weight loss itself, right? If you're trying to intermittent fast for the health benefits, you're trying to get health benefits of weight loss. And so you can get the same health benefits of intermittent fasting by doing any kind of diet that leads to sustainable weight loss. And so rather than glorify intermittent fasting for this thing that is the end-all be-all because it makes you healthier, right? It's better to focus on figuring out how you diet or eat in such a way that you lose weight consistently and sustainably so that you can have the health benefits of weight loss. And so the specific kind of question that was asked of me to answer on this podcast was intermittent fasting as it pertains to people with diabetes. Now, what I have found and what I've read in the research is that intermittent fasting is not more or less beneficial than something else for diabetics. And reason being is, weight loss in general leads to better insulin sensitivity. And trying to gather and get yourself into ketosis by intermittent fasting and trying to manage all of that stuff is oftentimes more difficult than people are willing to put up with, and would be much more better off just focusing on doing something that's long-term sustainable to lose the weight, to actually improve your blood markers if you are a diabetic. And so again, it's the same thing. Like if intermittent fasting works for you and it helps you lose weight, you're going to get those health benefits whether you're diabetic or not. If intermittent fasting doesn't work for you and something else works way better, do the thing that works way better, because you're going to get the weight loss and you're going to see the same health benefits as a result. There's no type, because you have diabetes does not mean that there are now certain diets that work better for you than other people. It just means that you now have a condition that you need to pay a little bit more attention to But the overall goal of weight loss is what we need to be focused on achieving, because that's going to ultimately lead to the health outcomes that you're looking for if you're a diabetic that's taking your health and your fitness seriously. And so don't think that you have to do this like low carb or no carb diets if you are diabetic because you have problems processing carbohydrates. Don't think that. That's not true. Again, if you can intermittent fast and you can lose 10 pounds in 2 months, 15 pounds in 2 months, and you're diabetic, but you can only do it for 2 months, and then it just becomes too much, and then you gain that weight back, versus if you could just do something where you lost a pound a week, or maybe even less, maybe you lose 7 pounds in 2 months, but you can consistently do that. It only takes a couple of months to beat this kind of dieting really hard thing with a diet that doesn't fit you, that you don't enjoy, to try and grasp some kind of benefits and hope that everything works out in the end. So, as you can see, I'm not a huge fan of intermittent fasting. It works for some people and that's great. But again, intermittent fasting is a weight loss tool. Not all tools work for everybody. But yeah, so let's recap. Fasting. There's two different kinds, intermittent fasting and longer period fasting. Intermittent fasting is primarily used as a dieting tool to try and lose weight. Long-term fasting is used by individuals who are trying to grasp some of the health benefits of long-term fasting, like some cognitive enhancement, immune system regeneration, gut health, things like that. Although none of that has been proven conclusively beneficial for long-term health. Intermittent fasting doesn't have any benefits outside of the benefits conferred by actually losing weight. And again, just to kind of wrap it all up, do what works for you. There's nothing special about fasting. If you want to try a 3-day fast, go for it. If you do, let me know how it goes. I'd love to hear about your experience with that. But as always, thank you for tuning in. Your time is your most valuable resource, and so if you spent that with me today, I'm grateful for it. I hope that I made it worth your time, and I will see you all in the next one.